if the Broncos win this game, no matter how it looks, they have had the weirdest month probably of any team, and they are 3-1.
Yeah.
Let's say what you want. Like, you would just go, well, they got a ton of talent. If Russell could just be a middle of the road guy with that talent around him and their running game and their defense, I mean, you're looking at a 12-win team, right? And it's pretty clear that, like, actually maybe they are the team that has the best chance to take on the Chiefs and not the Chargers, and the Raiders would be fucked. I mean, at 0-4, you aren't. What happens, guy? I mean, are we looking at like
Becky Hammond takes over?
Someone DM'd me the other day and said, listen, I'm not some crazy ass like take guy, and I'm not coming to you with some conspiracy theory, but do you think the amount of money Mark has just on the line and, you know, Vegas trying to be a big deal, that he could admit after 1 year, I completely screwed up and go hire Sean Payton? Because you would say like Sean Payton might be interested in the job and kind of give him that type of John Gruden 5-6 years, give him $70-80 million. You know, I think he always liked Derek.
It'd be like the chip year with the Niners, where they cut the cord after 1 year, right? After Tom Sula.
What would
but
you
they'd have
say
to be, I think they'd have
5-11?
I was going to say 6. I think 6 wins.
Or lower.
How do you run it back? How do you not cut? What did Josh get contract wise? He probably got a lot.
I would guess $10 million a year,
for at least 5 years, right? Guys are getting 6-year contracts.
Because I'm not going to play.
Did he get out of the John Gruden contract?
I felt like he did. I mean, that's not public knowledge.
Probably did.
If you're taking an educated guess, you think he did. He did keep on his kid, so maybe he's playing nice. It does feel. I would say 5 wins. You would have to acknowledge he's just a complete disaster. Right?
You don't think 6 would be 11 losses? 6-11.
It's a lot of losses.
Even 7-10. Who knows how it looks now? 7-10. You know, I mean, I guess you've already lost 3, so it means you're a 500 team the rest of the way.
Actually, not terrible. It wouldn't feel. You'd just be kind of going back and forth.
But I think 6-11.
That sounds awful. Yeah.
Like
you go 6-11. You're usually drafting in the top 10.
They made the playoffs last year.
Yeah, it had a chance. I mean, they had a chance on the 10-yard line to win the first round game against the Bengals. Even though when you watch the game, they got outplayed.
And if you add to that, what would Sean Payton? If Sean Payton has any options, you know, if he has the option of the Raiders or the Chargers, he takes the Chargers job.
Yeah,
right. If he has the option of the Cowboys, and you know, maybe he takes the Cowboys job. But yeah, John, I don't think it's crazy that Josh McDaniels could be one and done.
If Josh McDaniels went 6-11 and got fired after a year, would you feel pretty confident that he'd never be a head coach again?
Yes. Because I think people view this job as like, it's one thing when you over 5 years with an organization and the organization's bad, you know, like it's one thing when you have mediocre results with a mediocre organization. But the Raiders, forget about the organization. They got good players. Like, how could you go win 6 games with this group?
And then they added Devontae Adams.
Yeah. So, yeah, the other thing is Mark Davis does need, like, he needs to win. Like, he wants to make money, right? And he does like it. Like, I do. There's no question.
I had someone DM me that said that they went to the Cardinal game. They were just in Vegas and they're like, I'm not even a Raider or a Cardinal fan. I was there and we got tickets and we went. And my big takeaway is that, and this guy wasn't trying to be some Raider hater. Like, you know, this podcast gets called every once in a while,
but not the other podcast.
No, not the Late Night with Haberman, Go Raiders. Just win, baby. Is that like one of his takeaways was he didn't feel, now it's early in the season because you watched that Week 18 game against the Chargers. It felt like a Raider home game. He's like, I'm not saying it's like Chargers, but he's like, it's just a lot of people there just kind of hanging. It's not just, it doesn't feel like the Coliseum. It doesn't feel like you go to a Chiefs game. It's just, and it kind of makes sense. I haven't just been in Vegas. You asked me, you're like, did you see a lot of Raider gear? And you're like, you don't really feel like, I looked at the stadium and it's clear like they have a presence, but when you're on the strip, it's just people from fucking all over the world. It's not like if you and I went downtown most major cities, like it feels like downtown Chicago, downtown Old Town Scottsdale, downtown San Francisco. Vegas is kind of unique, would be a little New York-ish, that if, depending on where you were in New York, if you were like Times Square, where you just feel like you see people from everywhere.
I was there when the Knights were in the Stanley Cup Finals, John. There was Knights gear. You couldn't miss it.
Stanley Cup Finals is a lot different than,
I know. But this is the NFL we're talking about here. Like, this is the Raiders.
I'm not saying I bet if you polled people are rooting for the Raiders, but you would also say if you and I we had lived in Vegas our entire life, we would have probably had a team, right? So yeah, a young kid maybe, but if I'm a 50-year-old guy who was born in LA or born in Texas or born in Seattle, and I've lived in Vegas since college, for 20, 25, 30 years, I had my squad. Most people you meet, like, who are you a fan of? Hell, you could go tomorrow to Colorado. I go tomorrow to Texas. You can run into someone from any state and you ask them, this because I live in Colorado, I live in Texas now, does not mean that they're a fan of the Broncos or the Cowboys. So, like, right. Actually, I was born in Miami. I've loved the Dolphins since Marino. That happens to a lot of humans, right? So I do think Vegas is kind of unique that way, that a lot of people that were already there, and it's a big place, might have already had, I don't know, their team.
It takes time. The only way to convert, or B, get, you need the 8-year-olds, as we've always talked about, is you got to win. He doesn't have time to waste, John. You're saying you don't think it's possible that it may never become that type of home field.
Well, it takes a long time to develop that. Yeah. Also, I just think it's a transient place to begin with. So most people, if you met someone over 45 years old, I would imagine the majority of people there, and maybe I'm speaking out of pocket here, were not born there. Think how many people you've met just in your life since you've been in the greater Bay Area, a guy from a different place that has their team from that place.
Yeah, I'm trying to think, have I met somebody who's a fan of every team? And I think the answer is yes. I've met a fan of every team.
But how many people do you know, for example, in the Bay Area that are not from Northern California that, like, yeah, I root for the Eagles or I root for the Cowboys. Like, they're my team. I grew up in Dallas.
And there's a lot of people who grew up in areas where their team sucked and they were a fan of somebody. There was some cool player on some other team and they just became a fan of that team, right?
For sure. You just think about
our generation. Good. Like, the last thing is we're just from here. Like, you meet Mets fans from like 1960. And like, oh yeah, that's the neighborhood I grew up in. Mets fan. Like, it's not really the way it works anymore.
But when someone asked me, like, I had this guy installing TVs today, and he's like, who you root for? He's like, I'm a big Suns fan. I'm like, I'm a Warriors fan. I'm a Steph, Clay, Draymond guy. But if you told me in 15 years, do I still like the Warriors? Well, what if I hate all their players? Like, no, I'd pivot. I might like some other team. I might like whoever, this French guy. What if I love that guy? What if he's like the next Michael Jordan, but from France?
Yeah.
So, but like, I would say the Niners and the Giants are two teams that I remember watching since I was like 5 or 6 pretty consistently. Like, I'm going to gravitate toward those two brands that I'll probably never pivot of just, even if I wasn't in the business with the Niners, like, I'd probably check the score. Like, what are the Niners doing?
I remember watching the Niners when I was 6, but I lived in Omaha, Nebraska. But I got a Joe Montana helmet, shoulder pads, jersey set for my birthday. They were just good then.
Well, and I look at college football a lot like that. Like, I just gravitate toward, like, I just go on my ESPN app, like, what were the SEC scores today? Because I want to check on Alabama, and I follow Harbaugh, so I always want to check on Michigan.
Yeah.
Well, if I tell you in 15 years that, like, there's a new set of teams, that it's no longer Michigan and Alabama, but it's A&M and Wisconsin, whatever, like, I would probably, if there's the top 5 teams consistently, you might just check those out, because I don't have, like, I didn't go to Oregon. I'm not Jeff Schwartz. You're going to say quack, quack, right? I didn't go to USC. So I'm just going to have, like, I am kind of just, I'm open for sale. Whoever's cool, I'm right now, like, what's Lincoln's team doing, right?
Yeah.
You just kind of gravitate toward that. And I think a lot of people in the NFL are not like that, right? Because the NFL is, if you've grown up anywhere near a major city, where I think college is a lot like that. I think the NBA historically can be a little bit like that. But the NFL, for most people, you either grew up around a team regionally, or it's like, I love Dan Marino when I was a kid. I've been a diehard Miami Dolphins fan my whole time. It's very rare to me that you meet a football person that are like, grew up in Dallas. I've lived in Vegas the last 30 years. Love the Cowboys, but the Raiders came, and now I'm just all in the Raiders. Now, you might go, I pay attention much closer to the Raiders, right?
Sure.
But, like, I would never, if they're both on in my allegiance, like, I'm watching the Cowboys, right? That's why God made 2 TVs, but
Luis has been in Vegas 30 years. Ton of different fans of teams here. Las Vegas Niner Empire is strong. There you go. Guess the line on Broncos Raiders. Do you know it? Have you looked at it?
Games in Vegas.
Games in Vegas.
Wouldn't you imagine a decent Bronco contingent coming?
Well, they've gone from booing their team for the first 3 weeks to maybe having a little hope. So yeah.
Pick them.
No, Raiders are favored by 2.5 points. Raiders are favored. Chiefs Bucks is our Sunday night game.
Would you say the Raiders of all the teams this week, even more than the Niners, and the Niners would be up there, must win?
Yeah, they'd be number one on the must win list for sure.
And you could argue last week they were near the top of the list, right?
Yep.
Josh McDaniels is 5-20 as a head coach. I know there's a long gap.
But what did he start 5? No, what did he start?
6-0, or
well,
maybe it's 5-0. Yeah, let me double check that.
Well, what I'm getting at is what's his losing streak? Unless he won like some week 17 game, he must be on a wild losing streak.
Sorry, I gotta. Maybe he's 5-20 his last 25. He's 11-20. So Josh McDaniels, his first season with the Denver Broncos, 09, 8-8.
Yep.
Next year, 3-9. 3-9,
which does not add up to 16.
No, and obviously he's 0-3.
So, okay, so he's 3 of his last 15 as he's won. And what did the 3-12 season? What did he start that year?
3-12. No, 3-9.
3-9. But what did he start? I'm saying he's 3-12, including this year. How many games in a row has he lost? Is what I'm getting at.
I'm trying to find. Okay, so he lost. He was 1-1, 1-2, 2-2. So he was 2-2. Then he L. So he's 2-6. Beats the Chiefs. Now he's 3-6. And then he goes L to be 3-9
straight as a head coach.
He's lost 6 straight. Yeah.